Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. My name is Jeremy Walsh, and I am the Director of Support, Training, and Documentation for BNI Connect. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar today. Today's webinar is one of our special webinars that we do for leadership teams. Especially this time of year, we have a lot of chapters that have changed over their leadership teams. There's new presidents and vice presidents and secretary treasurers and visitor hosts and growth coordinators and all sorts of positions that are now taking over in the chapter, and we want to make sure that you are ready to go and all set and prepared for your incoming term. So we do a couple of different webinars. One that we did yesterday was entitled the BNI Connect Leadership Team Tools and Reports, where we went through a lot of the really how to enter a POMS report and how to enter visitors and how to enter the speaker rotation and all those types of things. Today we're going to go in a little bit of different direction. Today we're going to talk about chapter goals. Now, one thing that you may or may not know is that BNI Connect has a way that you can input and then track your goals throughout your leadership team term, whether that's 6 months or for the next year. And it's just one of those mantras: that which gets measured gets done. So this really does help us to keep track of what we're doing throughout the year and to stay on track with that. So before we get started with today's webinar, just a couple of really quick housekeeping things. The first of which is, if you're with us today, then you'll know that this is a live webinar. So that means that if you have any questions at all as we're going through the material today, please feel free to ask questions. The best way to ask questions is to please type your question in to the questions panel. I'll see that pop up on my screen and I'll be able to answer that as we're going along. Now, that being said, it doesn't have to be a question about just the material today. If you have a question about anything else in BNI Connect, I'd be happy to answer those questions as well. Now, we're scheduled, I do try to keep these webinars to about 30 minutes, and that's just out of respect for everybody's time. I know you guys are all really busy with your own jobs and your own careers, and not all of you are full-time BNI people. So I do try to keep these kind of short and sweet and digestible at about 30 minutes apiece. That said, I will stay on this webinar until every single question is asked. This is what I do all day, every day. I answer questions about BNI Connect, so I'm happy to do that live. Finally, we are recording this, so if you would like to review it later, you are welcome to do so. You'll find the recording in a couple of different places. The first place is if you click this question mark here in the upper right-hand corner of BNI Connect, or if you just go to support.bniconnect.com, it'll take you to a site that looks like this. This is the support site, and right here, live and recorded webinars. Just click that. Our list of live webinars is here, and we have a whole series of webinars that we do on a monthly basis. These are all our October webinars. And then we also have our recordings. So I've already put up all of the September recordings, and I hope to have these October recordings up very soon. So you can watch the videos all here. And again, we have the chapter web pages, leadership team tools from last month, and the chapter goals last month was actually only last week. But you'll also be able to find those on YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com/BNI Connect Global, you will see them all up here as well. So here's our YouTube channel. It has tons and tons of material up here. I recommend that you subscribe to that page if you'd like to know when new things are coming in. So let's see. Robert says he can't see my screen. I believe I have my my screen showing right now that has BNI Connect on it. Is anybody else able to see my screen? Or is everybody? Okay, so I just got a whole bunch of responses. Jenny and Samuel, Molly, Julie, Shirley, Rob, and John. Everybody can see it okay. Robert, if you're having trouble seeing it, I recommend a couple of things. If you're on the mobile application, you may need to switch which tab you're on. If you are on a regular computer, please, you may need to log out of your connection and log back in again, but it should be sharing at this point. So, all right. So the other thing with this webinar, there is a handout. You should be able to see a handout that is on the right-hand side in the GoToWebinar software. You should see a section that says handouts, and that handout will have really it's an Excel form of what we're going to be doing today, because a lot of people find it easier to do something like this in an offline fashion and then be able to come back to it and just enter the data into BNI Connect, if that makes sense. So I do recommend that you download that handout if you're not seeing it or you can't find it. Again, it's going to be in the GoToWebinar software, but if you can't find it, just shoot me an email, jeremy@bni.com or support@bniconnect.com, and I'll be happy to do that. I'll send it off to you. All right. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So the goals here in BNI Connect, the goals are a very important piece. Again, it helps us to really stay on top of what it is that we're doing here in BNI throughout the year. And yeah, as I said, we're all really, really busy people. We have a ton of stuff that we're doing on a weekly basis, and we're also trying to run these BNI chapters. So we tend to need a little bit more organization to stay on top of this, and the goals program can help with that, because it's going to do two things. It's going to help us keep track of our numerical goals, how big we want the chapter to get, how many referrals we want to pass as a chapter, those types of things. But it's also going to help us keep track of like different things that we want to accomplish throughout the year as well. So let me show you what I mean by that. Now, to get to the goals in BNI Connect, we're going to have to go to those scary places beyond the home page. So we're going to have to click past the home page here. To do that, we need to use these menus at the top. We have Network, Operations, and Reports. Network is going to be all the social media stuff, the groups and the connections, things like that. Operations is where we go for day-to-day input and really the day-to-day chapter management functions. Reports are always going to be read-only. So if we're looking to work with goals, we're looking to enter our goals, we're looking to establish goals, the place we need to go to is Operations. All right, so I'm going to go to Operations. Now I'm going to be working with one of my test chapters here. I am a member, by the way. I'm a member here in Rhode Island in the Wakefield chapter of BNI, but I don't want to mess up my own leadership team, so I'm going to work with one of my test chapters here, which is the BNI Burr chapter up in Antarctica. Or actually, I always say up in Antarctica. It's actually down in Antarctica. And once we get to the operations, we have all our different weekly functions, managing visitors, managing the meeting, managing memberships. But below that, we have manage goals. And this is where we're going to go to establish our goals and then to stay on top of them and track them afterwards. So the place we're going to go right now is Enter Chapter Goals, because we need to establish them for the first time. Now the first thing we're going to be asked to do is to establish a couple of things. It's going to ask us our start month and year. And what this is doing is when we input our goals, we're going to be inputting them in 6-month increments. It can be any 6-month period you want it to be, but we can only do 6 months at a time. And that's just the amount of screen real estate we have more than anything else. So that's the first thing. We're going to have to choose which 6-month period. Now, by default, it's going to bring us to our next BNI 6-month period, which is actually next April, but I want to do this for October. So I'm going to bring it back to this month. So we're going to start in October and use the next 6-month period. Now, the second thing it's asking us for is a long-term vision. Now, the long-term vision is kind of answering the question, where do you want to go as a chapter, right? Where do you want to get to? So what is the end result that we're looking for here? Now, most of the time, the way I recommend approaching this particular question is this is more of a kind of a general concept question. We're going to be defining our actual goals, how many members we want to be and how many referrals want to pass and how much thank you for closed business in just a minute. To me, this is more of a kind of general concept. Where do you want to be as a chapter? So one thing that, the BNI Burr chapter, our leadership team sat down, a bunch of penguins and polar bears, and we decided that we want to grow this chapter to be the largest chapter in the entire continent. In addition, we wish to be the #1 chapter in closed business and referrals within a 2 100-mile radius. So kind of that's our BHAG, if you've ever heard of that term, the BHAG, the big, hairy, audacious goal that we want to get to. Now, if the long-term vision is, kind of that point on the highway that you want to reach eventually, the mission statement is kind of your vehicle to get there. So it's going to be really your guiding light and principles for achieving that goal the way you want to achieve it. So our mission statement in the BRRR chapter, so how we're going to get to be the biggest chapter in the entire continent is we're going to do this by helping members increase their business through a structured, positive, and professional word-of-mouth program that enables them to develop long-term, meaningful relationships with quality business professionals. So that is our mission statement in the BNI BRRR chapter. All right, so once you've established that, now by the way, the reason they are asking you this now is you only have to establish your mission statement and your long-term vision once. You'll notice it was already here when I clicked into it, and that's because we only need to put that in one time and it will save it. Because whereas the numbers of your goal are going to change somewhat regularly, this particular part of it is, for the most part, going to stay the same. We're always going to have the same vision and how we want to get there. So once we get to this point, we click Go, and essentially what it's going to do is create a blank spreadsheet for us for that 6-month period that we chose. So you'll see here we have October, November, December, January, February, and March. So that's this next 6-month period in BNI. Now, if you had already started this before, some of the data may be filled out for you. Otherwise, you're going to end up like I am here with a blank sheet. Now, before we get into the bottom part of it, there is one decision that you need to make before you get started. And that is, how would you like to enter your goals? And this question is really asking, are you going to be using a big number, or are you going to be using a smaller number that will then extrapolate for you later? So when you're putting goals in for the whole chapter, again, we're looking at when we do the total on the POMS report, what's that big number we want to get to? What's the total number of referrals that our entire chapter is passing? Whereas if you're doing this per member, you're going to be putting in a smaller number, which will then get calculated by your goal number of members. All right, so that's an important distinction to make. I can tell you that just about everybody that uses this particular tool uses the 4 whole chapter numbers. Very few people use the per member numbers. So after you've made that decision, we now can scroll down a little bit and you'll see the spreadsheet has a number of different rows in it. And the blue headers here are going to be all of our chapter success drivers. That's what we call them, our chapter success drivers. And they're all the measurable things that we're going to be using in BNI Connect. So we have our attendance percentage, so how many members are showing up on a weekly basis. We have our total number of one-to-one meetings. CEUs, and for those regions that may not be using CEUs, CEU stands for Chapter Education Units. For example, today's webinar would count as an education unit. So you would make sure that you give yourself 1 CEU credit for today's session. Number of visitors, new memberships, number of members in chapter, number of referrals, and finally, thank you for closed business. So these are all the things that we're going to be measuring in our chapter. So then for each of these chapter success drivers, we're going to have a goal and we're going to have mechanisms. Now the goal is fairly straightforward. That's going to be our numbers. So for example, with attendance percentage, now I know in Antarctica that we have, right now we have somewhere about an 86% attendance rate. So the way I like to approach this is, because we're in October, I kind of know where we are right now. And just a couple of weeks probably isn't quite enough time to make any humongous changes. So I'm going to go with a bet that we're going to stay right about where we are right now. Then what I like to look at is I like to actually skip ahead all the way to the end. And it's also easy to figure out, little bit longer term, not quite short term, a little bit longer term, where do we want to get to? So in 6 months, I'm going to be implementing some changes that are going to be beneficial for my chapter and for the member experience there. By the time I'm done, I think we're going to hit, let's say 96% attendance. So I want to make it so that we barely have anybody absent. And then what I can do is I can kind of break down the difference and increment along the way. So I know if I'm going from 86 to 96, that's going to be really 10 points over that time. So I can go up by 2 per month. All right, nice, steady, gradual increase there. Now, I know this is a very simplistic way to look at it. And I know for all of you business consultants out there and you financial advisors and accountants and bookkeepers, I am being purposefully vague here in doing this. Now, we could complicate this and get very granular in our details here. For example, November and December, especially December, tend to be blizzard months in Antarctica. They tend to be also holiday in the United States and many other places. So I kind of know that attendance might dip a little bit more than expected in that month. So, I could take that into account, but quite frankly, what I would say, and this is just my advice to you, start small, then go back and change it. It's better to have something on this sheet, then go back and adjust the sales later than it is to make it so overly complicated, analyzing every single variable, that you end up with nothing. And again, I don't think anybody out there, is this your full-time job that you want to be spending 20 hours just putting your goals in? So I say, keep it a little bit simpler and get something in there. And again, you can always come back and make adjustments. These are not locked down once you put them in, so you can come back in and fix them later. All right, so that's the numbers that we're going to put in. The next thing that we have here are the mechanisms. Now, mechanisms are things to remind yourself or your leadership team to do on a monthly basis in support of those goals. And again, this goes back to us all being really, really busy in our jobs and our lives. And a lot of times we have these great ideas for our chapter that, oh yeah, you know what? We're gonna be doing a Visitors Day in April, right? Well, in order to do a Visitors Day, it's not just standing up the week before and saying, hey, we're doing a Visitors Day next week. Go get some visitors, right? Anybody that's been in BNI a while knows that if you're going to run a real Visitors Day, you need 6 to 8 weeks of planning in order to make that happen. But a lot of times, we get to the chapter and we're so busy and we're focused and we're networking, we're passing business, all this stuff, that we forget that we're going to announce the Visitors Day. But so no worries, we'll do it next week. And then next week comes by and, we forgot again. So it gets pushed off for another week and another week. And all of a sudden, a month goes by before you know it. So what these mechanisms are for, really to keep you on track, to remind you of what you wanted to do during those times. So perhaps some things that could help with attendance percentage. So in Antarctica, in the Burr chapter, I know that our past leadership teams haven't been all that great about enforcing the attendance policy. So I want to make sure our initiative as a leadership team is to make sure that the accountability letters are being sent, right? And that's actually an initiative that I might have to continue on to make sure it's going for a couple of months, especially with the new rolling 6-month attendance. So that's one mechanism. The other thing that I might need to do to support that is to do an education moment. And maybe another one, an educational moment, encouraging subs and maybe to increase attendance, and we're not going to skip our meeting, but we're going to have a joint meeting with the frozen assets chapter. Right, so these are all different, really, mechanisms. They're different things or initiatives that you're planning out for the whole year in order to support any of these goals. Now, you don't have to fill all of these out if you don't have time to or you don't want to. Again, some of these things may also apply to multiple goals along the way. But at any point, if you need to take a break, you need to go off and do something else, just be sure to click the Save button down here at the bottom. It'll save it, and it'll just leave you right here. It says saved successfully at the bottom. One thing to keep in mind, BNI Connect does have a 30-minute timeout. So that means that if you get up from your computer and you leave for 30 minutes, by the time you get back, BNI Connect will have locked you out of the system. They will log you out. You will lose anything you were working on, and you'll have to retype it all in. So be sure you click that Save button every once in a while. Now, the other thing is that there is some help for this. So you have your attendance percentage. If you look up here, there's a button at the top. It says Chapter Goal Guide. And this Chapter Goal Guide has possible mechanisms. Now, this is not a complete list. This is just something to help you get started with the brainstorming process of different things that you might do to support the chapter. So, here's one. We could do make sure that we're handing out our VP reports on a monthly basis. Here's a positive one, acknowledging people for perfect attendance. That's a good. I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to highlight it, copy it, and I'm going to paste that in January because I want to look at perfect attendance up to that point, including all the holidays. So I want to make sure that we are really on top of being positive and supportive, when we come back from those vacations. All right, so let's move on to another one of these. Now, you don't have to go in order. I do recommend that you skip around, actually, because the next most important thing I think on here is number of members in the chapter. Number of members in the chapter. And this is how strong of a chapter do we want to be? Now, once again, I like to start out with where we are, and I know that right now we have 30 members in the Burr chapter, and I know we want to grow. Yeah, let's grow by 10. So I want to grow by 10 members. So we want to grow by a third in the next 6 months. So that gives us a nice, let's see, a nice linear path would be 10, so that's 2 a month. So 32, 34, 36, 38, and 40. Now, once again, you can take into account things like leadership team day or visitor days and stack days and things like that where you may have some dips and falls. I'm choosing to keep this simple for now. And once again, we can come up with mechanisms. For example, I know that, let's say in March, we want to have our visitor day. Right? So what we need to do, planning this out, we actually need to go back a couple of months. We need to announce the visitor day. And we need to make sure we are inviting or doing, make sure we are doing invitations for the visitor day. Right? So again, this is helping you to plan out more of a long-term strategy instead of keeping everything last minute. All right, so that's the number of members in the chapter. So once we know that, once we know the number of members in the chapter, almost all of the rest of this form just falls into place, right? Because if we know the number of members in the chapter, the next one up from here is we know how many new memberships we need on a monthly basis. So if we're growing by 2, we need 2 new memberships a month, right? Well, actually, let me back up for a second because you actually need slightly more than 2. And the reason you need more than 2 is that most chapters, I know my own personal chapter, we're 50 members. Unfortunately, we're not the same 50 members we started with 20 years ago. I've been a member for 15 years, and there's only a couple of people in the chapter that are 10 years and above. which means that every chapter has what we call attrition. And attrition is really just people will leave BNI. And quite frankly, there's a lot of people that we just couldn't do anything about. And it was, in some cases, good reasons they left BNI. Maybe they were doing so well they got a promotion, or maybe they split off to go start their own business or start a new business, or upscale to another state, whatever it might be. There's very legitimate and reasons that we can't do anything about. So the average, the national average, is somewhere around 1 member per month, which is funny because it's actually almost irregardless of the size of your chapter. Most times it averages about 1 member per month. So if we're going to grow by 2 per month, what we really need is 3 new members per month. So you kind of always want to keep that in mind as well. And how are we going to encourage new members? Maybe we're going to make sure we do a stack day as well. And we want to do let's say we want to do a contact sphere exercise. Right, which is going to help encourage the visitor day process as well. And you can fill those in. And then if we know the number of new memberships, then the next thing is members come from visitors. So we know that we can, if we need so many new members, we need so many visitors. Now here's where you might have to do a little research. You may have to find out what your conversion rate is. So how many visitors have you had over a period of time and how many new members have you had? And you should be able to figure out your conversion rate because not every visitor turns into a new member. A lot of times it's going to be usually 1 in every 3 visitors or 1 in every 4 visitors ends up inputting an application. So let's just say that we do really well in our chapter and about 1/3 of our visitors end up becoming members. So that means that in order to get 3 new members, we are going to need 9 visitors. Right? That's a conversion rate of 3. Now again, we have different things that are supporting this. We have our Visitors Day. Maybe in the beginning, one thing we want to make sure that we do is we're implementing the excuse the visitor or the visitor orientation. Right, so all those different mechanisms. All right, so now the next thing we're doing is we're measuring the stuff with the members, which is the referrals, the CEUs, and the one-to-ones. Now for us in our region, we subscribe to a practice that we call the power of 1. Right? It's called the power of 1. And what we strive for, what our chapter strives for, is that everybody has 1 of everything every week. So we're looking to make sure that every week we are participating in 1 CEU. We're participating in, participating in 1 one-to-one, and we're trying to produce 1 referral every week. So that's the power of 1. It also means no more than 1 absence and bring 1 visitor a month. But we're concentrating on 1 one-to-one, 1 CEU, and 1 referral. So that makes this actually pretty easy. So if we have 30 members in the chapter, we have 4 weeks in a month, let's say, we're looking for about 120. And then this can go to 128, 136, 144, 152, and 160. So nice, easy math there. And things that we can do to support that are things like, let's say the BNI game. We're going to use the BNI game to get through the slow months of November and December. Right, and again, you can continue to fill out different things. And what's nice about this is we have our numbers of referrals. Since we're doing the power of 1, that's going to be the same for the one-to-ones and CEUs. So we have 120, 128, 136, 144, 152, and 160. And the same thing for CEUs. And then we're almost done. Now we just have the thank you for closed business at the bottom. As I said, I do like to jump around on this sheet a little bit. Thank you for closed business. Again, we want to be $1 million chapter, so I'm just going to take $1 million and divide that by 12. You know what? I'm going to round up. $100,000. And we're going to do $100,000 in business every month. I'm going to save that. And now that we've saved our goals, we can go back and review them. So as you go along on a month-by-month basis, it will start to record your goals based on the POMS report. Right, so if I go back to the operations menu and I go to, instead of create chapter goals, I'm going to go to view chapter goals. Oops, I went back a little bit too far. So if I go back to the operations menu, and we have the manage goals and we have the view chapter goals. And what will happen is as the months go by, it will fill in the actual goals. You know, so far in October, we have 100% attendance. We've had 6 one-to-ones in the chapter, 9 CEUs, 1 visitor so far. So it's going to fill those out as we go along throughout the year. Let me just show you one quick chapter that is utilizing this for real, so you can see what that looks like. All right, the Tampa Bay region, they use this throughout the entire region. So I can usually just pick any random chapter, and they have yet to fail me. They've always had them filled out. But let's go back to April and take a look at how they did for the last 6 months here. So here we go. This is a chapter that his long-term vision is to be proactive, engaged chapter whose member accomplish 100 rainbows monthly. I'm not sure what the rainbows are. That must be a local initiative. And they're going to cross the line of 5 million, 4.9 by 99. They have a goal of 100% attendance, and they did pretty well, 95, 94, 96. They dipped a little bit in July, but then they went back up to 95 and 96. Total number of one-to-ones. Looks like they've been doing fairly well at achieving those goals. And their CEUs, their visitors, look at that. They're right on board those first couple of months with their visitors. So looks like they had a goal of basically 3 new members per month. They hit 3, 3, 1, 2, 4. So they averaged almost on par with what their goals were. And we can see how this kept in line with a little bit of attrition as well, because their goal was to get 55, 49, 50, 51, and they kind of grew from 49 to 52 to 51, 50, 50. So they've been staying on track with their chapter size. And there's their thank you for closed business. So that is the chapter goals program. Again, it can be a very valuable and useful tool for you and your team to utilize throughout the year. What I'd like to do now is to open this up to any questions. We are at the bottom of the hour, so I do want to be respectful of your time. If you have another job to get off to or someplace else to go, I would like to say thank you so much for being here today and for spending some time with me and reviewing the chapter goals in BNI Connect. If you enjoyed today's webinar, or if you find this format helpful for learning, I would say that a great referral for me is to please join us for some more webinars this month. We're going to be doing a whole series of webinars over the next month. Our very next webinar is Thursday, the chapter web pages. So every chapter in BNI has a web page. We're going to be reviewing the chapter web pages. And then starting next week, we're going to go into our member series, completing your profile and using the online referrals and connecting with other members and all that. So we do have a couple of questions. Robert says, can we look at last year's goals? Yes, you can look at last year's goals. You can find it as if, well, let me rephrase that. I'm sorry. If your chapter has been entering the goals all this time, then yes, you can go back and look at any goals. It's not limited to just your term. And most of the time, your chapter has access to follow along as well. They just can't enter them. All right, does that make sense, Robert? And then Robert also asks, can we listen to yesterday's webinar? You can as soon as I get it uploaded. So again, that will be up on the support site. So if you go to, you hit this question mark in the upper right-hand corner, you go to live and recorded webinars. Now, I don't have yesterday's up yet, but I do have the one from last week up here in the September webinars. And again, it's largely the same content, but it is slightly different questions that people ask during the process. So does that help, Robert? And today's webinar, I'm hoping to get uploaded in the next couple of days. All right, Samuel says, I'm a new incoming president. I don't have access to edit the goals. Will that be turned on later? So Samuel, as soon as you become the president, and the way to check that is you can go to your roster report or click this profile button at the bottom. As soon as you see on your profile that president has been added as one of your roles in BNI, then you should be able to now access this. If you still can't, right, see how I have all these different roles here, I'm an admin, an executive director, and all this stuff. So once you see president listed on yours, you should be able to access it. If you still can't, just talk to your executive director or your director consultant for your chapter. It is possible that they have it turned off in your area. All right, do we have any additional questions? All right, if there's no additional questions, I'm just going to say thank you guys all so much for being here. I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Remember, a good referral for me is to please let other people know about these webinars, and I'd love to see your new members and your other leadership team members on a future session. In the meantime, happy connecting.